big needles for breakfast, dinner and tea, because that's the way this life goes. Hello, my name is Ingrid Wagner, and this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, I'm going to teach you how to cast on and knit, how to purl and to cast off. It's the very basics of knitting, and because I think it's a lot easier to learn when you've got bigger needles and bigger yarn, that's exactly what we're going to do. The yarn is actually woven fabric. It's a selvage of industrial weaving, which would otherwise just be thrown away as waste by the mills. It's 100% wool, and it knits up very, very quickly, so you can see your results and you can feel what you're doing, and you'll get your results in no time at all, really. So you'll get a rug in 4 hours, you'll get a seat pad in 45 minutes. But before I run away with myself, let's start at the very beginning. Right guys, this is for all of you who I've ever spoken to who have said, well, I can knit and I can purl, or I can knit really, but I can't actually cast on because my mum always did it for me, or my auntie always did it for me, or my friend always did it for me. So I'm going to show you how to cast on and to make your mum, your auntie, your friend redundant. Alright, this is for right hand knitters first, and then I'm going to do it for left hand knitters. So we start with a slip stitch. A slip stitch is a bit like tying a tie, and it means that you can move the knot. You can make it bigger or smaller, and you need to do that because of the size of the knitting needles. Right, right-handed people, so lay your knitting yarn, your big knit yarn in this case, over your left hand. Take the long piece with your right hand, take it across your palm and tuck it through the short end into a loop. Then I want you to remove the whole lot from your hand, pull the loop and the short end. Okay? Now if you pull the long end, you'll find that knot becomes bigger or smaller. Alright? So pop that onto your left hand knitting needle, and that's called your first stitch. Alright, so take your second knitting needle in your right hand, and I want you to place that knitting needle through the stitch like this. Okay, right, hold both needles with your left hand, then take the yarn in your right hand, and you're going to take it round the back of the needle and through the middle. Then I want you to hold the yarn and the right hand needle in your right hand, and you're going to push the right hand needle through the first one. It's going to pull the yarn through. That's your new stitch, and you're going to put it onto your left hand needle. Okay? Right, let's do that again. So you put the yarn into the stitch, take the yarn round the back, push the needle through. Let go of the long piece, by the way. Then just pull that one because it gives you enough room to put the stitch onto the left hand needle. Okay? Tighten it up a bit. You don't need to tighten it up much. So, just going to do that again. Now you can take the needle out and put it back in again, but it's, you know, going to take it's going to take time and energy. So just pop it behind, and again just take take the yarn around, push the needle through, pull the yarn through and put it onto. Now when you put it onto your left hand needle, don't put it on like that, okay? I want you to almost bring the left hand needle round to the front of the loop and put it on. Just gives an extra twist, okay? Now some people put the needle through the loop altogether. Through the loop altogether like that, or they pass it between two stitches. I don't think it matters which you do. So take the yarn round, bring the needle through and create your next stitch and put it onto your left hand needle. Put your needle through, take the yarn around. Use your hands there, your hands will probably want to help. Push the right hand needle through and put that stitch onto the left hand needle. Yarn around, push the needle through. Make sure you hold on to that yarn when you're bringing the needle through, because you might lose it otherwise. And if the yarn needs a bit of help with being pushed around, that's okay, you can do that. The yarn's big enough to big enough and ugly enough to need a bit of help now and then. Alright, so going to put about another 2 or 3 stitches on. And actually, you know, when you this is a bit like when you're knitting, you'll see the likeness between this and actual knitting when I come to show you how to do the knit stitch. At the moment you're just making stitches, so you could carry on like that. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches on there. And you can see if you went up, this needle would take about, I don't know, about 20 stitches. And if you wanted to make a rug or something like that, then you move to a bigger needle and put more stitches on. Okay, this seat pad, for example, has 14 stitches on it. That's just the length of the needle, and it's knitted in the thicker yarn. We're using the medium yarn here. So this is just done in plain knit stitch. So I'm going to tell you how to do that next. So this is a bit like with the right-handed people, this is your right hand, and this is a bit like a fisherman standing on the edge of a lake, and he's throwing the line into the lake, and he's doing it because he wants to catch fish. So that's a bit like your fishing line, and you're not going to catch a fish, you're going to catch a stitch each time you want to work. All right, so that's the first stitch you put your needle into. Like casting on, you take the yarn around, you push the needle through. Now this time, because what you're going to do is to transfer all of these stitches that you've made from this needle over to this one. Okay, I'm going to do that again for you. So you're transferring these stitches now. So you're going to put the needle in, you're going to take the yarn round through the middle, pull it a little bit. Alright, hold the right hand yarn and the right hand needle in your right hand. Then see the gap, you can see the gap there through your stitch. I want you to push the needle through that gap. There you go, come through there. Alright, now you've finished working with that stitch, so I want you to take it off the left hand needle. Just take it off altogether. Okay, the stitch drops down into the fabric, becomes part of it, and it won't come undone because you've tied a knot in it. So, needle in, yarn round, push through. The last word's always off. If you remember that, that's your last stitch has to come off, and you've transferred 3 already. So you're going to transfer another one. And by the way, there are no slow knitters and fast knitters in big knitting. Everybody knits at the same kind of pace. And you don't have to worry about things like tension, apart from when you're learning, and that'll go, because it'll just sort itself out. The big yarn just sorts itself out. There we go. And what you're doing is creating a fabric each time you knit. Okay, so there you go. There's your first row, and look how big that is already. Now, if you carry on doing that, what's called the knit stitch, some people call it the garter stitch, your knitting will always be bumpy on one side and bumpy on the other side. If you want it to lie flat on one side, like this sofa throw, and bumpy on the other side, we need to add in a purl stitch. Okay? Now, for something like our seat pad, which is just plain knit, and that's the stitch you've just learned, so you would just do that all the time, and then you would cast off at the end. With this one, we need to add in a purl stitch, so that's what I'm going to show you now. Right, now, when you did the knit stitch, you put your needle in there and your yarn was on that side, so everything was on this side. With the purl stitch, everything is going to be close to you. So instead of the needle going in that way, the needle is now going to go in that way, alright, so it's near to you. And the yarn starts on this side as well. And this time the yarn goes around the needle that way, and your thumb just pushes. If you reverse, if you drive, by the way, just think of it like reversing back through the stitch. Alright, and then take the stitch off. It'll feel like a bit like knitting backwards. And if you feel there's not enough space for your needle, just let your thumb go in and make the stitch bigger. It goes round, back, and off. The last word is always off again. So, needle goes in, the yarn goes round, the needle reverses back through, and the yarn comes off. Okay, so you continue with that purl stitch, and once you have learned the plain stitch, which you did first, and the knit stitch, you can do any of our textiles at all. Alright, so there you go. Just like this one, this knitting is now lying flat, okay, on the front. And if you want it to be just bumpy, as we said, on one side, bumpy on the other, and that's exactly how our bolster cushion is done as well, then you just do the first stitch we learned. So let's just cast off. We're going to get rid of the stitches. Alright, and this applies, these two stitches apply whether you are doing a big rug or a small rug or whatever. Now let me just show you before we cast off how you move from the knit stitch to the purl stitch. So for example, if you're putting a border on your rugs, then start with 2 purl stitches. Remember, it's all on this side. If you want to move to a knit stitch halfway through the row, move the yarn to the other side, and there you go. You're doing your knit stitch, and you can see there, that's a bobbly bit on this side and a smooth bit. Okay, so I'm just going to take those 2 undone. Actually, you know, you don't have to have a sharp intake of breath with big knitting when you take the stitches out. If you want to undo your knitting, You can see the stitches because look at the size of them, they're big. So it doesn't matter. There's not much chance of you dropping any stitches, I can tell you. Okay, we're going to cast off. So, knit 2 stitches. And then take the first stitch you knitted over the second one and off the end of the needle. Do the same with the next one, so you're just knitting the next one over the top, off the end. And that's over the top and off the end. And keep doing that all the way along the row, so that you can just get rid of the stitches. Okay, and do it with your fingers rather than with the needle, because with big knitting it's sometimes easier for your fingers to get involved. Okay. Alright, so the last one, take the stitch over and you're left with 1 stitch at the end. So just cut about that much of yarn away, and you're going to just put the remaining yarn through the last loop and tighten it. Alright? Okay. And then to neaten it up, okay, there we go, just push it through the stitches at the end of the row. The same with the first one as well. The stitches are big enough for you to be able to just thread the yarn through and out of sight. Alright, so it's nice and neat on the front. Alright, so that's for right-handed people. So now I'm going to show you how to do this when you're left-handed. Okay, so for left-handers, we're starting from the beginning. We're going to cast on, and you're first of all going to make the slip knot, and I want you to put the short end of the yarn over your right hand. Take the yarn in your left hand, take it across your palm, not crossing it with silver but with a loop. Take the whole lot off your palm, pull the loop and the short end. Okay, and there's your beginning stitch. So you're going to put it onto your right hand needle, and that leaves your left hand free to do the work, because as you're left-handed, that's what works for you. Okay, so you're going to tuck push the needle into the stitch, hold both needles with your left hand, take the long yarn in your left hand, to hold both needles in your right hand, take the yarn in your left hand, round the back and through the middle. Just hang on to that short end for the first stitch. Okay. And you're going to put it onto the right hand. Okay, pop the needle behind, take it round, push it through and put it onto the needle. Pop it behind, tighten it up just a little bit, take the yarn around the needle, and put it on there. Okay, I'm just going to put a couple more stitches on there. And one more that's round and on there. Okay, all right. Okay, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches on there. All right, so now you're going to knit this time. Instead of making the stitches, you're going to transfer these stitches from this needle over to your left hand one. Now there's something I just want to show you here very quickly. Those are stitches which are being cast on for a left-handed person. If a right-handed person now tries to knit them, they'll be a little bit awkward for them to get the needle into. And it's because they're on for a left-handed person. The right-handed person would have to change the stitch around. Okay, so stitches for a left-handed person are always on the needle the other way around to a right-handed. Right, so your left-hand needle is going to act a bit like the fisherman's line, and it goes through the stitch. You take hold of the yarn in your left hand, take it round the back through the middle, and then push the left-hand needle through the gap, and you take it off the right-hand needle. Okay, so needle in, it goes round, there's your gap, there, the needle comes through and the yarn comes off the right hand needle. Alright, anything with a process to it is going to stay in your mind. The number of left-handed people I've come across who maybe were taught to knit by right-handed mums, friends, grandmas, who maybe thought that knitting was just done by right-handed people and left-handed people couldn't do it. So you may be one of those people. So left-handed, you can knit left-handed. It's very difficult for a right-handed person to teach a left-handed person how to knit. So I'm not surprised if you've one of those people who's had a right-handed mum, grandma, etc., who couldn't teach you, or who found it difficult to teach you, or who even thought you weren't very good at knitting. Right, okay, so you're going to swap your hands over, and like I said to the right-hand knitters, you continue doing that stitch if you want to do bumpy on one side and bumpy on the other. But we're going to add in now a purl stitch, which means that your knitting will be flat on one side and bumpy on the other, and it means that you can knit any rug, any of our textiles actually, at all. So instead of the needle going in there and the yarn being there, the needle is going to come in and be on this side, and the yarn is going to be on this side as well. So you're going to take the yarn that way around the needle, and then you're going to reverse back through the needle, and you're going to take the stitch off. Okay, so right, so the needle goes in and the yarn goes round, and then you see where the gap is there. You want to make that needle come through the gap there and off. Okay, so I'll do that again. Needle goes in, the yarn goes round, and because big knitting is so big, you can see what you're doing on there. So if you write with your right hand, if you write with your left hand and you eat your food with your left hand, then you are likely to be a real lefty. You may very well be ambidextrous, be able to move both, use both your right hand and your left hand. Okay, all right, so. And now I'm going to show you how to cast off. Actually, I'm just going to do a purl row next. Just going to do a purl row before we cast off. All right. Remember, the needle's got to come in this side, yarn round. And the last stitch on the row. Okay. All right, and now you can see it lying flat there. All right, so we're just going to cast off now. So right, there's one thing here on the, let me show you, on the right hand, on the right-handed one, can you see where the casting off edge lies flat at the front? And we don't really want to see that, and we cast it off on a knit row. So whatever row is facing you, you should really cast off in the opposite way. So if the flat side is facing you, and that means you're meant to be knitting, you cast off purl wise. If the purl side is facing you, the bobbly bits, and you should be doing a purl row, you cast off with a knit row. So on here we're using that for the front, and that is the flat side facing you, which is the knitting. So we're going to cast off in a purl way. Okay, so you'll purl 2 stitches. And then you take the back stitch over the front one and off the end of the needle. Okay. Remember to use the yarn from this side of the needle. And if you're a natural left-hander, you will find this a lot more easy. There we go. Okay, that's over the top and off the end. And you can see already that the casting off row is lying on the back. So that's how it should be on the front when you're casting off. opposite to the way that you normally would do. Okay, so, and you keep doing that to the end of the row, and that's your casting off completed. It's actually, if you are a right-handed person, you can teach yourself to knit left-handed, because I've done that, because I think that the world is sometimes made up of right-handed people, or people who think that we ought to do everything right-handed. And actually, there's a lot of people who want to do this left-handed, so okay. There we go. All right. And that's the casting off edge there. So you don't see any of it on the front of your knitting. So the last stitch, take the needle out, and there's the loop on the last stitch, and put the yarn through there and pull it tight, okay? And to put it out of sight, just thread it through the stitches which are big enough to hide it. Do this on the back of your knitting, okay? Thread it all the way across, and then it'll be hidden from sight. And the same, do the same with that one. So thread it through the stitches, and it'll be tucked away out of sight. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the lesson today using the small needles and the big knit yarn, and you can see just from the small sample that we've done today how if you keep repeating that, you will be able to make not just things with the small needles, i.e. cushions, small item, or bags for example, but you can also make on the next size needle, which are these, exactly the same thing that you've just learnt on the knitting and the purling, casting on and casting off. You can move up to the next size needle if you want to make a bigger textile like this one. Okay, it's exactly the same, 1 row knit, 1 row purl. Exactly as you have just learned, so you can make bigger. Unlike little knitting, which means you have to do usually something small because you're a beginner, and then bigger when you're more experienced. Big knitting, you can just waltz in straight away and do big things. So there you go, 1 row knit, 1 row purl. You can do that in 4 hours. You can also do in 4 hours a sofa throw on the same size needles, okay? All right, and then you can also do, how scary is this for a beginner? Use the big needles to make a bigger carpet. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. And this is the size carpet that you could make. It's 1 row knit, 1 row purl, exactly as you have just learned. If you do want to ask me any questions, you can find me at ingridwagner.com. And all of my details are on the website. We have a full online shop, so you can go there and buy the needles and the yarn and make whatever you would like. Okay, happy big knitting. For breakfast, dinner, lunch and tea. How about dessert? That's free to finish. Sweet as sweet can be. Big knitting. I could eat spoonfuls of it every time.